Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 104. And as always, be reminded, if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, just be reminded that you can not only listen to our sultry voices, but see our lovely faces in full Technicolor over on YouTube as well. Now, other than that, join us on Facebook. We have a brand new group. If you search for Camera Shake Podcast group. And we're on TikTok as well. And we've got some interesting videos coming out there as well. So anyway, that being said, this is Camera Shake Podcast episode 104. 104, and we're not in the same place.
Back where we started, again.
Is it the COVID? Oh, no.
No, it's a accumulation of time, teeth, and hybrid car. That's the best I could come up with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, particularly teeth, man. I've literally just come back from the dentist. It's been, well, actually, to be honest, it hasn't been too bad, but half my face is still anesthetized. So
yeah,
if I start drooling,
well, there's nothing unusual about that.
Well, and if that isn't a reason to watch the whole episode on YouTube just to see me drool, then I don't know what is.
It's true. And in post, I'm just going to make your cheek look just a little bit larger than it really is.
Yeah. Luckily there's no swelling, but it's, I'm starting to get the feeling back now. So
I had a wisdom tooth out a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, something like that, like last one. And the guy who did it, local to me, never been to him before to have that kind of thing done. And he just put the knee down and he said, right, I'm going to start now. And I'd had one out previously and they were yanking at it, moving it around, all of that kind of stuff. It took bloody ages. But this guy, I thought he'd done something just to and I thought he was going around just the other side of me just to change position, to come at it from a slightly different angle. And he said, all done. I didn't think he'd done anything at all. Absolutely outstanding. Couldn't believe it. No pain afterward, nothing at all.
Oh, great.
Absolutely brilliant. And yeah, I was for about 8 hours afterwards.
Well, did you have all four wisdom tooth pulled out individually? Or?
I only ever got the top two through, and right. I had one out a few years ago because it was giving me bother. It's like it was bunching up my top teeth too much, so it was like rubbing on the side. They were impacted as well, so it was causing me a bit of jip. Once that was gone, the other one didn't cause any problems at all. That pain had all subsided, but then because it was impacted, it was difficult to clean, so it basically started to rot. And so he said, yeah, you should probably have it out. So all right then, come on then, let's do it.
Oh man, I had all four taken out at the same time when I was 14, maybe something like that. That was not fun, man. No, that was not fun. In fact,
I bet you, and that would have been back at a time where I don't know, they weren't as good at it. They're a bit more rough. Did you have to go into hospital for it?
No. It was at a orthodontist, or jaw surgeon, as they call it in Germany. Wow. And the thing is, like, he had this thing where basically he went, well, we're going to do local anesthetics because if they put you under, there's a certain risk involved with that, and they basically thought that wasn't necessary. So it was all local. And so he had this thing where he said, like, well, if you listen to music like on headphones during the surgery, then you're distracted and it won't be half as bad, and all that. And so on the way to the surgery, we stopped at this, record store basically. And I was looking at a Walkman at the time. Remember tapes?
A Walkman,
yeah. And so I was looking for some album, just, anything. I was so nervous, I wasn't really very selective. And the only thing they had pretty much in the store was Whitney Houston. Like, I Want to Dance with Somebody. Do you remember that album? Mm-hmm. And I just went, all right, that'll do. I don't care. Like, Anyway, so I listened to that whole album I can't remember how long the surgery lasted, maybe an hour or so. And so I listened to the whole album. And, and the thing is, like, when somebody's doing something inside of your head, you can still hear it, like, internally, And so he had to, like, drill through my jaw on one side, and then he had to basically use a little circular saw to cut one of the wisdom teeth into like 4 pieces because it was like so awkwardly embedded in my jaw or whatever, and so I could hear all of that going on, and at the same time, all I could see were him and the assistant all like masked up and everything, and I could just see blood splatter out of my mouth, blah blah, and so so that was my experience, right? And then the thing is, though, ever since then, whenever I hear Whitney Houston's voice, I start to get phantom toothache.
Oh, I remember this because there was a time where I just wouldn't stop playing that in the car once.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's it's a weird. Obviously, it's like some weird psychological thing, but I always whenever I hear Whitney Houston songs, I always associate that with toothache and having my wisdom teeth removed. So I don't know. Just,
that's funny.
One of the things I try and avoid in the house is having any Whitney Houston tracks playing. But on the flip side, though, I mean, I was hamster face for about a week, because my face was like swollen up on both sides. But then at least after that, you're done with it.
Yeah,
like you're never gonna have to revisit that chapter ever again. Because they're all gone. So in some respects, it was it was worthwhile. But in others, it wasn't. I don't know. I haven't had many surgeries in my life, and that was probably the most traumatic one.
All right, I'm feeling a bit sick now, so let's move on.
I'm feeling sick too because I haven't actually eaten anything since this morning, since I knew I had to. And the funniest thing is, the reason why I went to the dentist today was because I lost a filling, and I lost the filling. The filling came out whilst I was eating ice cream, like literally soft ice cream. That was it. It didn't even take anything hard to bite on or anything like that. It was just ice cream. That's it.
That's what she said.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, in many, again, at least I could feel it, and I felt sort of, I don't know, there was some kind of suction effect or something like that, and then I could sort of sense the filling in my mouth a little. So yeah. Anyway, there you go. All fixed now. All good. 190 pounds later.
Yeah.
I'm back.
There'll be secret expenses there somewhere, no doubt.
Man, I want to be a dentist. Like at that rate, that guy's making like 600 pounds an hour. I'm like, because I was in it for about 20 minutes. So happy days.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh. All right.
So yeah, what else is happening? What's been happening on your end?
What's that?
What's been happening on your end?
I had a couple of days off. Went up to north, and visited my girlfriend's family. But did a job while I was up there. Funny enough, cool. Filmed a band performance on Friday night, which was
cool.
It was good. Actually, great band, really great band. However. And this, it's being done as a bit of a favor as well. So I didn't have much information about the situation that it would be in. Didn't have much information about the audio. So I took what I could to prepare, given that I could only take a very limited amount of stuff too. And so the idea was to just go 2 camera setup either side, and we'll just, one will just stay static and one I'll operate. And then I'll switch lenses on them, switch sides, and then operate the other side as well for the second set. So just mixing it up a little bit. Intent not to use the entire concert. Intent just to chop up what they might want, and figured that's going to be sufficient for what they want to use it for right now. Great. What I didn't know was how small the venue was going to be.
Oh, shoot.
And how little lighting there was. And that the dance floor was miniature, which means even just 6 or 7 or 8 people on there meant that there was literally no view to be had anymore. So solved the lighting issue beforehand. I managed to talk to them. It's going to look better if you can get some coloured lighting out front and some lighting back onto you, so you're not basically silhouetted. You need that. So kind of corrected that. Ultimately, it looked great. It actually really looked nice. The audio is going to be great. Got them to multi-track it too, because they're all mic'd up. So, well, just connect to your laptop and got that. So that's great. First set is going to look great either side. All good. Second set, unusable. Can't see anything. Gave up a few songs in. Couldn't see anything. Wasn't just a nightmare. But they will still get what they need out of it, which is so it's a bit of fun. A little bit of tweaking and adapting to the situation a little bit when you're there. But I went into it knowing that I didn't know much about it, and so you just got to flex a little bit. All good. That's good fun.
I think the main thing to consider if you go up north, it's like, did you understand what they were saying?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Very. Very. Yes. It's quite clear.
Because that's my problem. The further north I go in the UK, the less of a clue I have. When people start talking, I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying.
Yeah. I guess there are only certain areas which are tricky if you've got a very strong accent from that area. Otherwise, no, I've never really had an issue.
Yeah, it's just it's funny. It's funny when you go. I don't know. I mean, it's the same thing is true though. If you go, to like Wales or something, like when people start talking in the valleys, no clue.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, no, I don't have that issue at all. I actually really like most northern accents as well. Not all of them. Not all of them, but most of them.
So here's the thing: if you're listening to this and you live, let's say, in the States or in Canada or something, what is your favorite British accent? Or did you even realize there are different British accents? Because I didn't really realize that before I moved to the UK. But since I've lived here, I have painfully been made aware of that, obviously. So, do you have a favorite British accent? Let us know. It'll be interesting little thing to put in the group. So, hit us up in the Facebook group and, let us know what your favorite British accent is.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll put that on next time. We'll just pretend.
Yeah. That's cool, man. So I'll probably put that together next week at some point. I'm still waiting for the multi-tracks to come through. And excuse me. It should look pretty decent. I think that I've been getting loads of little bits done over this past week. A lot of backup happening because I use multiple SSDs for like working SSDs, so to speak, and then I back up when a project's complete. I back up to a NAS as I'm working on a project. So I've got two of everything constantly, and then when a project's complete, it comes off the NAS, comes off my working hard drives, and then gets backed up to the cloud. So that's always there. So that's my general sort of process. So I had to do a load of backup because I've got several terabytes of SSDs now, totally full with ongoing projects.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, shooting with more cameras these days, all exclusively 4K rather than any 1080p. I guess is part of the reason too. Some longer events that have been happening recently too that are just there, and I don't get rid of them off the working drive until a while after the project is complete, because there's always a few revisions that need to happen, right? So I wait as long as I can until I really need the space, just in case. And it's kind of a rolling kind of project basis like that. So I've had to do a load of that to free up some space. Last few days it takes longer than you think to start
for sure,
to pull all that stuff out. But it's quite nice in Resolve to do that with video projects. You have because it's set up a bit differently. You have a kind of a database on your home screen, if you like, of all your projects, and it's literally a matter of right clicking and export project archive. No matter where your files are sat, even though I put them all in the same place, every so often there'll be an image that you've pulled in or a sound effect or something like that hasn't quite made it onto your working hard drive and is sat somewhere on your internal hard drive. It pulls all that in as well. And consolidates it all, which is nice.
Yeah, that's good. That's one of the habits I've gotten into, is actually to copy everything over into the project container in Final Cut. When I'm using any kind of Foley sounds or music or anything that I use repeatedly, basically.
Yep.
Rather than leaving it in the original file, I sort of pull that into the actual folder that I'm working on, or to the to the library.
That's it.
So that it saves it all into one place. So if in the distant future, if I open that project up again on a different computer, there won't be any missing files.
That's it.
But it doesn't do it automatically. It's something I have to kind of get into the habit of doing, basically.
So Resolve doesn't do it automatically when you're just working on a project. It will leave it wherever you've pulled it in from until you go to export an archive, and then it will pull it all in.
Right.
And actually all it's doing is it creates an archive folder, and the folders within it match where they were originally. So if you've got like external hard drive, project one, video, and then all your video files, and then you've got a sound effect on internal hard drive, documents, folder one, folder two, whatever, and then your sound effect file. When it creates a project archive, that same folder structure will exist within that project archive. It's just the way, rather than putting it all into one specific folder, it keeps the same folder structure, which is if you always have a specific folder structure, like I do, all my cameras are always separated, my audio is always separated into a separate folder, sound effects into another, images into another, stuff like that, it keeps that, which is, I don't know if all software does that. I'm guessing they probably do. It makes sense to do it that way. So that's nice. That's how I do it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, not too long ago, I had a look at a Final Cut project that I did years ago. I think I was looking for I think it was actually a sound effect that I was looking for, and I knew that it must have been in this project file. And so I thought, for shits and giggles, I'll just load that project up and have a look. And actually, it was hilarious because I had zero structure. It was literally everything was in one folder. All the files, video, audio, music, Foley, anything and everything, stills, all sorts of different additional files, all in one thing. And, so I can honestly say I'm quite proud of myself as to how I structure my folder tree now whenever I start a new project in Final Cut.
The important thing is to do it the same every time.
Yeah.
So you always know where to look. And whether it's the tiniest project, like our weekly podcast episodes, they're tiny projects. They're long, but they're the content of it, the different attribute sort of files that are in it. There's very, very, very few. Yeah. So, but I still try and keep the same folder structure because it's just consistent. And I always know where to look for anything then.
Exactly. And that's actually the same, when I'm doing anything with stills, like, the post-production process, and no matter what I'm I always keep the same structure in that as well. So, whether that's, the raw files, for example, then edit files, edit versions of an image, as I'm editing it in the process, and I create different versions of it, and then the finals that I actually use.
Yeah.
So that gives me an idea, actually. There's two things in this, like backing your files up, which I know that you may have very different ways of backing our stuff up. Mm-hmm. And then, how to create folder structures within projects. We should probably devote an entire episode to either one of these topics, because actually there's quite a lot in that. And especially backing up your files is so important, to get that right.
It's the most critical thing you can be doing. And, there may be people out there go, I don't really back up, I've never had an issue. And that's great. And you're very lucky. It's only a problem when you do have an issue. And trust me, it's going to happen one day, whether that's you accidentally not realizing you've imported that footage from that SD card yet. I know someone on this video who's done that before.
Absolutely. Has happened.
Or, it's going to happen. Or your hard drive is just going to fail. And I've had hard drives fail.
Yeah.
I know you have.
And the thing is, it's so important to have a backup plan or several backup plans, because in the immortal words of Mike Tyson, everybody's got a plan until he gets punched in the face.
Precisely. Who knew how much wisdom that man had?
Exactly. So, I mean, I've certainly learned that the hard way is to have a backup plan or several backup plans.
On the surface, it's a boring topic. I actually love it. I find it really interesting and fun to work out the most efficient way to back stuff up, because I know I've got to do it and no one wants to do it. So you've got to make it as pain-free as possible.
Exactly.
So I won't go into any. There are other things that I do, but I won't go into more because we'll dedicate some time to this in the future.
Yeah,
and we'll go into that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, I mean, interesting thing. So what's been happening? Well, for me, it's been headshots as of late. So I've done a number of those yet again. But in the process of doing that, actually, I took this as an opportunity to recreate some of my Photoshop actions that I use a lot.
That's a good idea.
So when I'm editing something, especially with portraits, there are certain processes you use a lot. One is frequency separation, for example, and and similar things. So that's just stuff that you use a lot. Or like, for instance, we talked about the Flambian technique in one of the previous episodes. That's a technique I use pretty much whenever I shoot interiors in buildings. Dodge and burn is another process where there are X amount of different ways that you could do it, but whichever dodge and burn technique you prefer, there are certain steps that you can turn into a Photoshop action, which is essentially just a preset. You click a button, it creates all the layers for you, it sets everything up so that you're ready to go. So really, you don't have to do all of that work every time. And so I've just taken the last few days as an opportunity to just rejig some of the Photoshop actions that I use a lot. And in the process, I've actually changed, just mentioned frequency separation. I've sort of changed the way I structure that a little bit so I can be a little bit more refined with that technique as well. And also I split that up into 8-bit and 16-bit images, because actually from a technical perspective, the way you set things up in Photoshop varies quite dramatically between 8-bit and 16-bit images when it comes to this particular technique. So I kind of thought it might, makes sense to have separate actions depending on what kind of image I'm working on.
Yeah.
So, and
Absolutely.
Again, it's a bit geeky, but actually it was super fun. And of course it saves me tons of time from here on in. So,
and at the very least, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's saving time for stuff that you do all the time. What's the point in spending, even if it's only a couple of minutes or 5 minutes, setting this up, having to, all right, if you haven't done it for a week, is it that first or that first? You don't have to, just get it bloody set. It's done. It's done. It's like recording a macro in Excel. It's exactly the same principle.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just if you add up the time that it takes to set all these processes up, create the layers, create masks, blah, blah, this and that and the other, set up different things. So let's say, for instance, that takes a minute, for argument's sake, in a given project. So for instance, if I'm doing a typical headshot, I use 2 or 3 of those processes. So let's say that's 3 minutes per headshot. I've just done a series of, I think, 8 headshots or something like that. That's 3 times 8. That's 24 minutes that I've actually saved myself on this particular
from one
process.
Action.
Yeah. So it's totally worth doing that once you start once you start using those techniques a lot.
Yeah.
Again, frequency separation is a really interesting thing. You can use that in so many different ways, and actually, you can really go into the fine detail with that, or you can make it a quick fix almost, depending on what you need at a time. So, it's one of these things we could probably devote a whole episode to that technique on its own, but it's something I use all the time. I mean, virtually with every headshot or portrait shoot that I do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, that's cool. I'm really lax at my actions in Photoshop, I have to say. But then I'm not in there nearly as much as I am in Resolve, for example, right? Not even close. So because I do it less frequently, I guess partly I like to the time isn't as important to me in that aspect, just for me. But partly I like to redo those actions to remind myself how to do them. It's so easy to forget.
Yeah, but there's certain things, for example, like dodge and burn is a good example. I mean, it's really easy. It's not hard at all.
Yeah.
There's nothing complicated about that. And again, there are a number of different ways that you could do it. You can do it with a 50% gray layer and use the dodge and smooth tool, or the dodge and burn tool even in Photoshop. A lot of people do that. I like to use curves.
Me too.
So ultimately, you set up two layers, two curve layers. One where you just pull the midtones up by about a stop, and one where you pull them down by about a stop, and then you create black masks for each one of those, and then you essentially just paint. You're dodging or burning in with a brush, and I find that it works for me. I just like the process. I like the fact that I can separate the dodging and the burning. And I also like the fact that I can then fade each one in and out, basically, depending on how I do it. And also with the brush, in addition, it gives you the flexibility to change the flow on a brush, or to change the opacity on a brush, so that you can treat different bits differently and stuff like that. So it just works for me. I like working like that. And then of course it gives you the opportunity at the end to go into that layer and then change the layer opacity, so that you can bring the whole effect more to the forefront, or you can dial it back a little bit, which I typically do, actually. I probably dial it back by about 50% or so, something like that, anywhere around that. And you can do that separately for the dodging and the burning. So you treat the shadows and the highlights separately in that respect. And so you can kind of balance it, that's just a thing to do. And so, setting that whole thing up, it's not complicated. It's just creating two curve layers, changing the curves, creating black masks. That is pretty much done, and relabeling the layers. It's not a lot of hassle. It's not difficult. But why would I want to do that every time? Because I use that technique on every headshot and every portrait I do. And not only that, I use it on also, actually, I use it on pretty much everything that I do.
There's going to be something,
interior
right?
shots, buildings, whatever. It's always something that I use. And so you just clicking one button and it does everything for me. Yeah, why not?
Just goes to show you how many, just in dodging and burning, how many different ways there are to do it. Because I use curves as well, but I don't adjust the curves at all. I just set one to screen and one to multiply. And is that right? Multiply?
Right.
Yeah, it must be. And then do it that way. Leave them at 100% opacity, so it's just way over the top, so I can actually see what I'm doing. And then I bring the opacity of those down to 0, and then bring them up one by one to wherever it feels about right. If that's 20%, 30%, well, I don't know. It depends on the project, but and do it that way. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's another way. It's another way you could do it. Using a 50% gray layer is a very that's a very popular way of doing it. It's also, again, not a bad thing. I used that method not too long ago, only a couple of days ago on something, and it's also not bad. It just depends on how you like to work. Again, as always in Photoshop, there's like 50 million ways of doing the same thing, and you just have to pick the one way that you prefer to do it.
Totally.
It's object removal is another thing.
Yeah.
Although having said that, over time I've sort of I've come up with my favorite ways of removing specific types of objects and using different tools for different jobs, because I feel that I get the best results, or it's the quickest, using one technique over another. Mm-hmm. So for instance, using the patch tool over the spot removal brush or something like that. Occasionally, what would be a good example? A flyaway hair is a good example. If you take a portrait of someone and you get some flyaway hairs, there's about 5 million different ways that you could remove that. Some methods work better than others. Like, for example, you could use a spot removal tool. You could use a stamp tool, or you could use the patch tool. And for me, the way I work, because I need to be relatively fast, the patch tool just works the best. it's quick and easy, and the end results are usually pretty good. So, and that's the thing, especially when you're working with a graphics pen or graphics tablet as well. Not fun. It just works the best for me. But it's you talk to another retoucher, and they have other preferred methods. And occasionally it pays off to pay attention to those sort of things, because occasionally you come across something, you go, oh, actually that makes sense.
Yeah, that's it.
Again, frequency separation. It's I thought that I spent some time on actually refining the way I do things a little bit, and I've come up with a number of additional ways that I can use that technique, and some additional tools that I can use within that technique. And so what that's led to is me just setting my layer structure up slightly differently from the way I used to do it. And it doesn't mean that I always use that method, because in some of the stuff that I do, it might not necessarily be the need to go in that complicated, 3/8 in a row, for instance, that's a really good example. There's really no need to spend hours on retouching the skin. That's not the point with that particular type of portrait.
It's about knowing those methods, knowing which method to use in the right kind of situation, and using it with either the quality of result or the speed in which you can get through it.
Yeah, exactly.
And the only way you can determine that, and it'll be different person to person too. You may find one technique is so much faster for me than another, and it might be vice versa for you, because it's just the way we think about and work with stuff. So you just got to use them all a few times over and over, and you'll start to know when to use them.
And it greatly varies as to whether you're working with a mouse, for example, or whether you're working with a graphics tablet. That really makes a massive difference. And that's what I found anyway. When I switched from using the mouse to retouching with a pen, it made the world of difference, and it's also changed the way I do things, of course. So it's interesting. Again, it's something. If anybody listening thinks that might be an interesting thing to do, we can definitely deep dive into the world of frequency separation if that's of interest. There are about a gazillion different videos on YouTube about this already. But yeah, if you like us to drop us a line, and we'll definitely do that. So that's basically what I've been up to. Now, I tell you what, actually, here's a funny thing. You love this one.
Go on.
So I went into my attic the other day, and other than realizing that it's really high time, for me to spend some serious time and then sort that thing out, I also realized that this might be a really cool little den to create a little podcast studio or something of that ilk.
How small is it?
You can stand up in it.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, you can stand up, and it's boarded. So you can.
How hot is it? How hot is it up there?
Well, it's not actually that hot. I'd be more worried about the cold, but there's a radiator up there.
Okay.
As in a plumbed in radiator, connected to the central heating. And we both, my wife and I, have no idea why it is up there, but it is, and it's working. So, so that could be an interesting thing.
Oh, that's cool
to do. Mainly because, of course, where I'm set right now in these sort of situations where we're remotely podcasting, for example, where I'm sitting right now, I'm literally in between the living room and the dining area. So, it means that everybody has to stay the hell away from where I am.
Otherwise, I really want you to be stuck up there now, because for 6 months of the year in particular, you are going to hate it, because it will be so hot.
Well, it might be an idea to put a window in there, which also wouldn't be terribly difficult.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah, I had a chat with my wife about this just as an idea, and she goes, "Oh, that's a really good idea." I'm like, "Really?"
It's because it will get rid of you. Yeah.
That's probably what it is. Yeah, exactly.
Of course it's a good idea.
Yeah. But in all seriousness, I wouldn't mind that at all, because it could literally mean that, I could do lots of different stuff up there without actually being in the way, for everyone. So it does need quite a lot of work though. So
do you know how many times you're going to fall asleep up there?
Yeah, I might have a hammock in there.
It's guaranteed.
Yeah, I could put a hammock up there in between the beams. Yeah, it's sort of I mean, from a space point of view, actually, the rear wall of it is, it's the original brick wall, and it looks a little ramshackle. It actually has a really cool look, so I can really see that working as a backdrop.
That's cool.
Actually, yeah, that could quite work.
Well, we'll have to go test that, find out.
Yeah, but there must be some drawbacks, obviously. I mean, one of the things is, I've got a hatch, much like yourself. We have like a hatch in the ceiling.
Yeah, getting up there's a pain, right?
Well, I'm gonna, you can get these pull down ladders.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to get something like that. But that's.
I guess it's just getting certain gear up there could be tricky.
I mean, the vast majority of gear would basically be gear that would actually just stay up there.
Yeah, true.
But it would be not too dissimilar to what we did with Learn, Play, Repeat, where we literally built a little set, so it'll just all be ready to go. In the event of. So yeah, that could be cool. And again, it'd be out of the way. So
there's one other thing I want to raise or talk about today is that DaVinci have released the latest update to Resolve. So it's now Resolve 18. So they've moved on to a major new version. It's in beta still, as far as I know, but you can still download it if you want to. But there's some cool new features. And I thought I'd just run through a couple of them because there could be some useful stuff moving forward for us and for anyone using DaVinci. Now, what I can't be sure of right now is whether these features are in the free version as well as the studio version, but you'll just have to go check that out. So they're updating the way they use the cloud. So there's a whole varied bits and pieces there, but your ability to collaborate across the cloud now is significantly improved. Where provided, let's say you and I have the same video files, we can collaborate within Resolve on a project and work on it at exactly the same time as well.
Oh, okay.
Which is nice. That's very, very cool. I'm gonna run through these quite quickly. I might stop on a couple of them a bit more. They're coming out with some enhanced sort of proxy workflows and offline proxy generators as too, which is what Adobe have been doing for ages anyway. So it's not, they're just catching up there, I think, really, more than anything else. Their way to manage media is improved. You can remote monitor stream now. So you can send what you're looking at to, I believe, any monitor in the world.
Okay.
So that if you're working for a client in the States and you need to do a session with them on this particular edit, they can view it in real time with you there and then, which is how that differs to, say, doing it over Zoom or something like that. I don't know. We'll see. There might be some real benefits to it. There might not.
Let's hope the quality is better because,
Well, this is probably what the major thing will be about it. I'd hope anyway. Object masking is improved. So it's got some. Every time they go through this, their AI, their inbuilt AI, it just gets better, right? So it can distinguish particular types of many more types of object. Let's say with a lot of ease. It instantly picks out like animals, vehicles, people, stuff like that without really thinking about it. And now it's added a whole host of more types of objects. Now this is a cool one. Automatic depth map. Okay. So you can load this in and it will, and you can set thresholds as well, and it will detect how what depth a particular item or set of pixels are within that image. So a person in the foreground, an object in the midground, and the background, let's say. And it will mask it, won't actually mask it, but it will mask what they are. And you can set it in such a way so you can then apply your grade or effects to just a specific depth of the image. So if you want, so if you just, you would key out like a person's skin and then do your grade on top of that. So that just in the simplest of terms, you could key out your skin and then on what's left, you could put your orange and teal look on it. Just so you don't affect your skin tone. That's what you'd normally do. But with this now, you could have nothing affect your foreground, your person, let's say, and your color grade affects everything else, the rest of the depth of the image. It could be that you just enhance the contrast on that front level of depth, if you like, and not the rest, and reduce the mid-tone details, whatever it might be. You can just now apply these to specific depths of your image, which is very cool and has got so much potential.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's a little bit like the new masking in Lightroom, for example, where you have,
but now being able to do it on video is
great.
It's brilliant. I can't wait to give that a proper try.
So did you say there's the beta version that's out now?
Yeah. Okay, so I'll hold fire. I could download it, but I won't. Unfortunately, Resolve doesn't allow you to have more than one version of Resolve installed. So like Premiere Pro, for example, you can have every version of Premiere Pro installed. It doesn't overwrite it. They are completely independent. Whereas most programs, you do need to, you overwrite it basically, and that Resolve does that. So you can't yet be sure that all your projects are going to work seamlessly in a beta version. So I'd rather wait and not break anything.
So is there any idea as to when the full version is going to be available?
I'm guessing within the next few weeks.
Okay.
It won't be long. Couple other things that they've improved. So track. So their ability to track moving warped surfaces is now in there properly. So the example they're giving, it's a good example. If you wanted to, I'll read this one. It's probably easiest. So apply graphics to surfaces that warp or change perspective in dramatic ways, like t-shirts, flags, or the side of a face. The surface tracker's customizable mesh follows the motion of a textured surface. Then you can apply graphics or whatever it was to cover up logos, for example. So if there's a t-shirt logo that's, all ruffled up and whatnot, it can track that properly and you can replace it or get rid of it.
Okay.
And it's just, seamless. It's that type of thing, which is very, very cool. So Resolve has had for a while kind of like a beauty effect, which will detect the face and skin and all of that and do a bit of a job on it, let's say.
Is that what you can see in every one of our episodes?
Say that again?
Is that what you can see at work in every episode of the Camera Shake podcast?
Yeah, and it's not powerful enough for you. So thankfully it's been updated.
Yeah. Obviously, it was needed.
So it's that's massively improved. They're talking about helps to address general imperfections by smoothing skin and recovering detail as well at the same time. I don't know how that much that differs. I don't actually use that effect very often, so I'm not sure how much that's changed. Other general, they've enhanced the subtitle features, transitions. You can now do 25 multicams at once if your machine can handle it. Improved YouTube and markers, that kind of stuff is in there. So this was always an issue. So if you were to add text that's not just your basic text, but anything that required Fusion, which is kind of their motion graphics and sort of engine, if you like, you would always need to render that section. It will do it all automatically, but you need to wait for it to render to be able to play it back smoothly. No more, which is very, very cool. That was a bit of an issue. It was a bit of a bug, that, as far as I was concerned, but they just got around to fixing it, which is great. Fairlight changes, which is their audio platform, has been changed. What I didn't know was that when Blackmagic bought DaVinci, and whenever it was, years and years, a few years ago now, They then bought Fairlight from, I think, a New Zealand or Australian company, and then integrated that. And they bought Fusion as well and integrated that. So that's actually how it kind of grew, which I didn't really know until I read an article the other day. There's a whole host of changes within the audio space there. Neural engine acceleration, bits around that. Atmospheric simulation generates randomized noise data to replicate different types of atmosphere. A bit like generating clouds and stuff like that, edge detection is being improved as well, and other things around color space. And then they've introduced the M1 Ultra proper performance in there. So that the M1 Ultra is what's coming in the Apple Studio Mac as well. And there's the list goes on, but they were some of the key ones that kind of struck my eye, which would be fun to use.
Well, I've got one little techie thing. It's a rumor, though, so just to make that very clear right from the start, it's a rumor, albeit the rumor comes from a source that's very usually, very close to the truth in the past. So this has to do with the next generation of the iPhone 14. Now, one of the biggest upgrades, according to this source, and again, let me just make that very clear, this is not coming from Apple directly. This is a established rumor source, if I could put it that way. But so what it looks like is that there's going to be an upgrade on the camera of the iPhone 14 for the first time in quite some time. So so far we've been used to the 12 megapixel camera on an iPhone. But on the iPhone 14, that's going to go to 48 megapixels.
48?
So 48 megapixels. Now, there are some caveats, though, because so according to this source, the sensor will be slightly larger, 57% larger, actually. Now, and the individual pixels are going to be smaller, obviously, so that they can fit on this, slightly larger sensor, basically. And of course, the impact that would have, because that's just physics, is that, of course, smaller pixels will basically mean worse low light performance, and I'm guessing that Apple are going to deal with that through software. So,
well, I mean, I don't care what they say. Low light performance on it is rubbish anyway. Now, because all they do is the 2-second exposure, and that practically, yes, if you are going to hold it still and keep it still and all of that for a particular shot, fine. It actually works all right, as you'd expect it to work. It's just a longer exposure. But in practical terms, I turn that 2-second thing off all the time because it doesn't work. It's just impractical. So I hope they just don't do make it 4 seconds instead.
Well, I mean, whatever algorithm they're running in the background to basically clean up a picture, there's going to be an element of noise reduction and everything else that's going to come into that. But and of course, that being said, there are some examples, on the desktop that basically allow you to do some really good noise reduction, and take care of, the sharpness that you inevitably lose when you ramp the noise reduction up and so on and so forth. So, let's see what the outcome is. I think, it's an interesting thing. Although that means, everything that I've just said, according to the source, obviously, only though applies to the Pro version. So I think what Apple is trying to do is basically, it sounds like they're essentially trying to, throw out the carrot to motivate people to fork out the extra cash to, to spend on the iPhone 14 Pro or Pro Max.
Yeah,
with the improved camera
that
system,
does sound like what they're doing, assuming it goes the way you just described. But it does sound like a feature that should be on the Pro version versus a regular phone version, Yeah, I just remember the days where, there was just basically one version and that was it. Yeah. But the fact that they are, you could argue that they haven't really helped. They've manipulated their prices in a way that it doesn't really help. But I guess the idea was to separate them out a little bit so that the iPhone itself could be slightly more accessible at a cheaper price point, and then the Pro version would then be more expensive than it was originally. I don't know. I don't know if it actually panned out that way or not. But.
Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, that's a greater, product palette out there. So that's, that, of course, there's all pros and cons. One of the things I found interesting though is that even on the basic models of the iPhone 14, again, this is just based on a particular source. So it sounds like even the basic model will have a 6.7 inch screen, which previously was only available on the 13 Pro. Again, interesting thing.
So their basic model's going to be 6.7, did you just say?
Yeah.
Well, they're 6.1 right now. The Max, the Pro Max, if you like, I think is 6.7.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. So currently,
it's too big.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't want that in my pocket.
You don't want anything big in your pocket,
huh?
You don't want anything big in your pants. Is that
no, I do not. No, there's not enough. There's no room left.
So yeah. Anyway, so I mean, we'll see. I'd be interested to see how much of this is actually going to turn out to be true.
Yeah.
But we shall see.
Apple, if you are listening, do not get rid of your 6.1 screen. Just don't do it. So. It's right. That's the right size for a phone.
Yeah, I'm quite happy with the size of my iPhone at the moment. So,
I don't want 6.7 as my standard now. No. Well, what's the Max version going to be? Oh, if they may not do it anymore, but...
This, I mean, speaking of the taxes generally, there's been a little bit of movement in the social media space as well. Of course, as probably everybody knows by now, Elon Musk has just recently, signed off on buying Twitter. So he's spent how much? $44 million. Is that what I'm thinking?
Yeah.
On Twitter. So that'll be interesting. But apparently, is
that what his Bitcoin's gone into?
Well, I mean, famously, of course, Donald Trump got kicked out of Twitter, and apparently he's now refusing to return because, of course, he set up his own failing social media app. Because what is it called? The Truth app or something like that.
Something idiotic, probably.
So yeah, so that's because that's been full of malfunctions and whatever. So. Anyway, so that's interesting. Instagram are making some changes to their algorithm so that they are favoring real accounts now, as opposed to those those accounts that basically pull in lots of content from other accounts. So apparently,
about bloody time, Instagram. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there've been a number of changes recently on Instagram, of course, in the way that they use their algorithm. We've talked about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago or something, 2-3 weeks ago, about how you can now set your feed so that it only shows you, stuff from people that you actually follow, rather than any other, random post. So they're obviously, moving into changing the algorithm so it addresses some of the concerns that people have. And of course, they have to do something because the competition is over on TikTok. By the way, if you are over on TikTok, check us out. I'm going to Camera Check Podcast on TikTok.
Shameless plug.
Shameless, very shameless. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, I mean, that's all I've got at the moment as far as news are concerned in the world of photography. And I know we're going to have to keep this episode slightly shorter this week, but we're going to be back next week with, in full length glory. But yeah, I think
she said.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, man. All good. Pleasure to chat as always.
As always. I could just about, I'm actually holding back the drool in all seriousness on this side of my mouth.
No, not very successfully.
Well,
and on that terrible disappointment.
Remember, if you do want to see me drool throughout this episode, make sure you head over to youtube.com/CameraShake. Otherwise, you can, as always, find us on all decent audio platforms. And hit us up on Facebook. Check out our Facebook group, Camera Shake Podcast, and hit us up on Instagram and TikTok. Now, That's it. That was episode 104. Incidentally, exactly 2 years since we started this.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. The weather's getting better, so maybe in the not too distant future we might be outside. But for this week, that is it.
Yeah.
Camera Shake Podcast signing off. See you next week.
See you later.